My name is Gavin Evans, and this is my review of Lost Season 5, and this will be a spoiler-filled review, so if you haven't seen it, go and watch it, then come back and watch my review because I will be going in depth. Lost Season 5 is unlike any other season of Lost so far, for all the worst reasons. I know they've teased elements of some time-traveling stuff in previous seasons, but this just took it to a whole new level where it just felt like a totally different show. The time traveling in this season is just so goofy and it never works. There's been elements of this show that has always taken itself a bit too seriously, where it's a bit too over the top, but there's still some sort of reality that this show has been based in, but that's completely gone here. This season is a complete mess. And it's even unclear in what this season is building up to. Seasons 3 and 2 was building up a confrontation between the survivors and the others. Season 4 was building towards a group of people escaping the island. And while I was watching this season, I'm just like, what's the end game of this season here? What are they building towards? And it doesn't become clear until the last 2 episodes. It's just unclear in what this season is about and what it's building up to. Now, there is some differences I liked about this season because for the first half, there's no flash forwards and flashbacks. Instead, it focuses on 2 different groups, and because of that, I think it progresses the story a lot better. But then in the second half, we start to get the flashbacks again to fill in certain gaps, and I just think that's very lazy writing. And I did like how at first there's a group of people off the island because it made the show feel different. For a show that has begun 5 different times now, for the beginning part of this season to feel as different as it does was very refreshing. Now that said though, the very opening scene of this season is the exact opening scene in seasons 2 and 3. Well, there's some guy who's hiding the face to, and he's getting ready for his day, he puts on a song, and it's just like, I've already seen this beginning multiple times already. But I think the biggest issue with this season is that nothing was planned out. Not just in this season, but in this entire show clearly. I guess J.J. Abrams has a habit of that because he did the same thing with the Star Wars sequel trilogy. If you've ever seen the TV show Dark, it's one of the greatest sci-fi shows ever. You don't scratch that, it's one of the greatest TV shows ever. It is a phenomenal TV show, and the best part about it is that you can tell that they planned out every single aspect of that show. Every single twist and turn and reveal, it was all planned out. You can tell because when I look back on that show, it makes more and more sense. And you get the opposite effect here. The more you think about this season, the less sense it makes. Everything feels made up on the spot. It just makes everything feel so random. And there was no build-up to this time-traveling plot in this season. Like, could you imagine in season 2 of this show if they found the picture of them at the Farmer Initiative in 1977? And you'd be like, wait, how? And you'd be like, how did they get there? And then you get the payoff this season. But because there's been no real build to anything that happens in this season, you get no payoff. Instead, you just get the reaction of, what's going on? What is this? And I don't think that's the reaction they were hoping on. The time traveling is just a bunch of nonsense here. For any story, no matter how over the top it is, you need logic and rules to ground it. Without that, it all falls apart. And there's no logic and rules here. They just make things up as the season progresses. The time flashes at the beginning of this season are just ridiculously stupid, but it just raises a bunch of questions like, how are they traveling through time? Why did they stop at 1974? If you stop and think about it, none of it makes sense. And my goodness, one thing I hate about this season is that whenever someone asks, where are we? Someone would be like, I believe you mean to ask, when are we? And the first time I'm like, okay, that's very cheeky. And then they did it again and 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 again. And it got to the point where I'm just like, if I hear "when are we" one more time, I'm just gonna lose my mind. Stop saying it. It's not as clever as you like to think it is. Like, oh my goodness. Some other questions that I had throughout this season is, okay, why did those people go back in time but the rest stayed in present time? Why? And the reason is because the plot said so. If they're traveling through time on the island, and there are these time flashes on the island that transport everyone through time, why don't they affect the other people on the island? Like when Sawyer sees Claire and Kate, why didn't they travel through time too? Because a time flash should affect everyone on the island, and the reason is that the script says so. The only good use of the time flash was when Locke was climbing down the well and there's a time flash and he falls down. That was the one good use of it because it did create some tension in that moment. But just everything else, like you stop and think about it, is, okay, so if the warp didn't go back in time with Locke, then why are the clothes? Now, I guess that's a bit nitpicky to be fair. And how do they even get back to the island? Like, how do they know that plane will crash? How do they know this will happen? Like, it's just so contrived. And then when you stop and think about the timeline, that stops making sense too. Because we see Jack get visited by Locke, and Locke's just like, you have to go back. And Jack's just like, get out of here, Locke. So then Ben's just like, Jack just got a ticket. You got him. So then I assume this is like when the flash forwards at the end of season 3 start in about 2 months, because Jack, has a beard and he's clearly been traveling on planes for some time, hoping that they will crash. But then like Locke dies shortly after he visits Jack. So as soon as you stop and think about the timeline, it all falls apart. And no one even makes a big deal about the fact that they're time traveling. My goodness. Like, Holy was the one person who talked about it. He was the one that's just like, hey, so I'm going to go ahead and write the script to The Empire Strikes Back and help George Lucas out. I would have liked it if they made more pop culture references. But my goodness, just this season did not work. The time traveling in it was just so random and out of place and just so made up. Like, for goodness sakes, the way this season ends is that Jack's planning to detonate a bomb that will reset the events of the entire show up until that point, and they won't crash on the island. How does he come to this conclusion? Because the one character is just like, it's astrophysics. Okay, I guess I'll do. And can we just talk for a minute about character motivations? Because character motivation is essential to any story being told. My favorite story ever, Last of Us Part 2, you understand and you feel why Ellie's going on this revenge quest. Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, you understand why Joel wants to get his memory erased. But in this season, I don't got the slightest clue why anyone is doing anything. They like to keep the character motivations as vague as possible, but that makes it impossible to get on board with anyone or any of their actions, because you don't know what they're trying to achieve. When everyone decides to go back to the island, and mind you, that's a huge decision to make. I didn't know why anyone would do such a thing. The character motivations are just like, we think it might be our destiny? Maybe? That's the best you got for such a huge decision of actually being marooned on an island. It creates an emotional detachment from any of the characters. And outside of the time-traveling nonsense, you get this modern plot with Ben, Locke, and Sun, and just, it was the most dull of plot. It really didn't work for me at all. And, well, let's talk about the characters, beginning with Jack. I like Jack as a character. I've liked him up until this point, and I think Matthew Fox has proven himself to be a good actor. But I did not like Jack this season. He was not Jack. I like the fact that they tried to change him and have him turn into his own version of Locke in some way, but I never bought it. Like, by the end of the season, his character motivation for everything is hinted to be the fact that he completely blew it with Kate. So because he blew it with Kate, he's just like, I'm just gonna blow this entire island up and maybe something will happen. Maybe it won't. That's the best character motivation you got? Like, if that's the case, then they should have just treated him like he's a villain, because he is the villain in this case. He's putting his own selfish desires above everyone else's. And if they actually turned him to the villain and they embraced it and they approached him that way, that would have been very interesting. His desperation and grief got the better of him, but they still paint him like the hero. Jack's motivation of wanting to be with Kate doesn't work, because they got into like one fight and he ended everything because of it. Just one fight. Like, my goodness, I understand real life, I understand ego and pride and the fear of rejection, I get it. But just talk to her. Like, if you're willing to go back to the island and blow everyone up, you'd think actually talk to her would be a step there. Before all that drastic measures. Like, for goodness sakes, there's one scene early on this season where he's spending the day with her and they get along really good, he's being nice to her. And then as soon as he asks her to go to the island with him, she gets mad. And it's just like, you blew it again! There you go. I'm not saying Kate's totally innocent, she should have been more open with Jack with what she was doing, and for the life of me, I can't understand why. But this is just a character motivation I can't get on board with. What does he even hope to accomplish by returning? The way he acts just made him the villain. And just the fact that they refused to go that route with him was really disappointing. Like, there's one moment where Sawyer, Kate, and Juliet are like, we have to stop him. And then 2 minutes later, they're like, maybe not. I really didn't like the way that Jack treated Sawyer this season. Like, Sawyer helped them out a lot. And they only screwed things up for him, and not once did Jack show any bit of appreciation. So, when Sawyer beat him up at the end, that's a great scene, and I think he kind of deserved it. So I was disappointed with the treatment of Jack, but I was also disappointed by the treatment of Kate. Evangeline Lilly is still great in this show, but her characters this season, she's just so grumpy all the time. She is far less likable here than she is in any of the previous seasons. And my goodness, the fact that she gets jealous of Sawyer and Juliet just shows how immature she is. Like, you made your choice. Grow up. And then we find out her motivation for everything is that she wants to find Claire for Aaron, and not once do I buy that. Like, they get to the island and not once is she like, have you seen Claire? Do you know where Claire is? So, yeah, I don't buy that as her motivation. My favorite character this season, as he is almost every season, is Sawyer. He has so many great lines, like there's one moment while they're on a raft getting shot at, and he sees that there's about to be a time flash, and he's like, thank the Lord! And then they time flash to an area where it's storming, and he's just like, I take that back, and I thought that was a great line. And there's a few emotionally effective moments with him, whether it's him reuniting with Jen or Kate and Jack. You do feel the weight of seeing these people again after everything he's been through. But my favorite aspect of his character this season is the fact that he did grow up. He matured. He settled down. He found a job that he was good at and liked. He found someone to share a life with. I liked seeing him like that. Until everyone else came and screwed it up. Like, if you want to talk about someone who should be seen as a victim this season, it's Sawyer and Juliet. They were happy until Jack, Kate, Holly, and Sayid just screwed everything up. And no one shows Sawyer any bit of appreciation after everything he does for them. I really feel bad for him this season. That said though, I hated where they took him in the last episode, because there he is with Juliet and Kate talking to Wars and Bernard. And Wars and Bernard are talking about how you need someone to love. And Sawyer looks at Kate, and in that moment, I'm just like, why? I don't buy it. The character has grown past that. He even has a conversation with Kate earlier that season where he's just like, we wouldn't have worked. He's happy with Juliet. And in that one moment, the writers decide to backtrack and ruin any bit of growth the character showed this season. I don't blame Soro. He's not a real person. I blame the writers. It was an awful decision to make. And I also like the fact that he critiques Jack and the way he led everyone, but by the end of this season, he's no better. So I think that was wasted potential to have Soro do really great in the leader role. Then you've got Juliet, who I liked in season 3, but she had nothing to do in season 4, and that's the case here. She's a very boring character. She's just overly nice, she doesn't react to almost anything, and she's lacking in any personality. And there's one scene where they try to make her look tough while they're on a submarine and she knocks this guy out, and I'm sorry, I don't buy it. Give me a break. I also do really feel bad for this character because it seems like whenever she's about to have a serious relationship with anyone, Kate gets in the way and draws the guy away. I feel bad for her. You know, she liked Jack, but Jack liked Kate, so he chose Kate over Juliet. Juliet likes Soro, they live happily together, and then Kate comes around and messes things up. You feel bad for her. I don't know if she's in the next season. I don't know if she's going to be dead or not, but I just have to say bullshit on the last 2 minutes of this season. I'm going to be honest, I know this sounds really bad, but when the chains are wrapped around her leg and dragging her down, I thought it looked really goofy. It looks like something that would be in a B horror movie. But when she fell down that pit, I'm just like, oh wow, she killed her off, and you see Soro's reaction, it was actually emotional. And then we see her at the bottom of this super huge pit, and she's fine. Give me a break. And one thing that's always been a part of the show that I'm going to touch on for just a bit is the love rectangle. It was a love triangle, and then it turned into a love rectangle, and then it turned into a love triangle again, and now it's a love rectangle. And I will say that Jack and Kate, they have a nice moment in one episode while they're on the boat at the end of season 4, and he asks her, "Are you with me?" And she says, "I've always been with you," and that's a real nice moment. But it's the only one we get because the two hate each other now, and they had such good chemistry, they were cute together, and I know it's realistic to show how couples do grow apart, but my goodness, just the fact that these two are together and they don't even discuss what happens, it's like you're showing a broken relationship, but the reason that it's broken is so lazy and contrived that you don't buy into it. And as soon as they get on the island, I find it funny because Soro's super happy to see Kate, and Jack just looks at them all jealous, and it's just like, yeah, you convinced her to go back to her ex, you did this. But as much as I enjoyed the love triangle and the personal drama for the first few seasons, it has overstayed its welcome. It's time to let the characters and relationships grow and put this to rest. Juliet and Soro should be together, and Jack and Kate should talk and try to make things right. That's where these characters should be. I hope this isn't an element that's present in season 6. Let's talk about Ben for a little bit. Ben, I liked him in season 3, I didn't like him in season 4, and I don't really like him here. Now, I do like how he was defensive over Jack in that one moment. Well, he's just like, give him a break. He's been through a lot. I like that. He has another great line on the plane where Jack just references the other passengers and he's just like, who cares? I like that. But some of the direction they took him, once again, I don't buy the fallout from Alex's death. He just let her die. It has no impact. And that scene with the smoke monster of him getting judgment, I thought was really stupid. He just actually doesn't do all that much this season. Any attempt to make him out to be this criminal mastermind is just embarrassing at this point. And we see him as a kid in 1977, and I think this could have been really interesting. Because there's always that popular time travel debate of, if you could go back in time, would you kill baby Hitler? And I would love it if they brought that kind of discussion over here to talk about Ben. We have a chance to kill him with everything that he's done to us. and actually talk about it. But Jack's just like, nah, he can die. And I like the fact that he did that, and Kate's just like, no, we should save him. And that was it. Like, really? And the way they approached it, like, I don't buy the fact that he would survive that shot in any way. But when Kate and Sawyer bring him over to the others, and they're just like, can you fix him? And they're just like, well, yes. But his memory will be gone, and his innocence will be gone as well. It's just like, do it. It's just like, oh, so they're responsible for making Ben evil. My god. Desmond. I love his relationship with Penny. I think it's actually one of the sweeter relationships in the show. And I love how he cares so much about them and how he's willing to stay away from everything. You know, there's that one moment where he gets shot by Ben, and then as soon as he sees that his family's in danger, he doesn't care that he's just been shot. He goes over and he beats the shit out of Ben for threatening his family. I love that moment. So he's not in this season a lot, but I do like him as a character. The one episode where he goes visits Daniel's mom, I can take it or leave it. But I still like this character. I just feel like he's been so mishandled this entire show. Saeed. Okay, when the season begins and he's off the island and he's getting chased by some people, it's just so serious and so over the top, and it's just dumb and goofy. I know this show came way before Chucky season 1, but there's one kill he does where he pushes someone onto a dishwasher with its knives up, and all I could think of was Chucky. Yes, like I said, this came first, but still. I guess he meets a wife, he falls in love, and then she dies, and it's just like, I never really cared about that, and I'm sorry, I say this in almost every review whenever someone gets hit by a vehicle, but whenever someone gets hit by a vehicle, I know it happens in real life, but it's just something that feels so random and so out of place that it kind of cracks me up. So when his wife died by getting hit by a vehicle, I kind of laughed. I know I'm not meant to, but it's unintentionally funny. But Saeed, the rest of the time, like, I don't really talk about this character in the rest of my reviews because he doesn't really do much after the first season, and I just feel like he's a character who's shown no progression or growth, and my goodness, he was so frustrating because Sawyer offers him the perfect deal to help him out, and he refused to take it. Like, I'm sorry, at that point, his dumbass deserved to be captured. Then you've got Richard, who's in this season a lot more. We've kind of seen glimpses of him before. And because of that, he just feels kind of off here. Like, they're treating him like this big, important character, but he hasn't been built up to at all. And he's pretty bland. He doesn't add much to the show. And then we got Holly, who's just so dumb and naive. He gets mad at everyone on the boat because they decided to lie to the public. And he's just like, if we all said that we were on an island that suddenly disappeared, they'd believe us. But we have to all stay together. And then he feels betrayed when they all don't agree to that. Like, that's how you get all of them locked up in a mental institute. So, he's just so dumb and naive. And, like, he's on the run from the police for a little bit. And he doesn't think to cut his hair. He doesn't think to disguise himself in any way. And he just acts like a complete child. But I also think his character is so terribly written because Ben goes to visit him and he's just like, we gotta go to the island. And he runs out, he gets arrested. He's like, I'd rather go to jail than see you or go to the island again. And then the next day he's just like, oh, I guess I'll go to the island now. And like I mentioned, that's like a real issue with keeping character motivation vague. But when we find out what motivated him, it's just this one conversation with this guy he's never met. Really? That was what did it? That said, so once they do get on the island and they discover that they time traveled, I like the fact that he's a one person who's willing to talk about the time travel logic. That made for some of the best moments this season. So as dumb, naive, and as frustrating as he is, he was entertaining because he talked about the actual time travel that no one else seemed to care about. Then we got Locke. Locke is a very hit or miss character, and I'll be honest, I'm very curious about who Locke is at the end of this season. Like, is it actually Locke? Is he back from the dead? Or what's going on there? I doubt the answer is going to be satisfying, but I am curious. That said, everything else about Locke this season is bad. The entire plot of him being the leader of the others I couldn't care less about. And there's just some really stupid moments with him. like that scene where he falls from the well and he breaks his leg. And he doesn't just break his leg, his bone is sticking out. It is not just broken, it's broken. And then he just crawls away and still gets up. Bullshit. If you're gonna show an injury that severe, commit to it. There's one scene where he visits Walt, and it's a very awkward scene. I don't know what purpose it had. And then there's one scene where he's going to kill himself, and then Ben convinces him not to, and then he tells Ben like two small things, and Ben then kills him. And it's just a very weird scene. Like, Ben explains it later on, but just the fact that he goes from wanting to kill himself to no, getting saved by Ben, and then Ben kills him, it's just a really stupid scene. Then we've got Daniel, who is one of the new characters from season 4, and I still don't care about him here. I think the entire idea that he was killed by his mom is very interesting, and it would have impact if I cared about it. But I didn't, so I didn't. His relationship with Charlotte wasn't hinted at all in season 4, so when she dies, it has no impact, and he just isn't an interesting character. And then we've got Miles, and this character's not well written, but I do think that Ken Leung did a better job with him this season. He felt more in place here. But there's this storyline where the doctor that we see in all the videos in seasons 2 and 3, where we find out that's Miles' dad, and I don't believe for a second that was planned out. I 100% believe that they're just like, well, he's Chinese, and he's Chinese, so what if he was his dad? And they're like, that's brilliant. And that plot didn't work at all. Any bit of emotion they tried to get from it completely failed. And then, maybe I misunderstood it, but they made it seem like he could talk to dead people, and if that's the case, that's really stupid, and it wasn't hinted at all, and it's just, you know, there's a line and you go over the line and you're just too silly and goofy and ridiculous, and I can't take you seriously. Jin and Sun. I think this is the most likable Jen has been this entire show, because Jen is always such a dick, but here he's just a nice presence to have around. And their story of trying to reunite should be the emotional core, but they hardly spend any time on it, so it doesn't really do its job. I do like the fact that Jen giving Locke his ring was supposed to be something to keep Sun away, but instead it had the opposite effect. So I think that's interesting, but yeah, it's still not the most interesting characters. Then you've got Jacob, who's been built up to, they made it seem like he's a ghost, and he's not a ghost, he's like this weird island god or whatever, and I felt like they backtracked there. Like, they were building him up to be some kind of ghost, and I would have liked that. The villains, I don't know their names, but the people at Farmerville who are the villains, who are after Jack and Sawyer and them, they're bland and forgettable. They add nothing to this season. They have no real character. So, yeah, lots of the characters are mishandled. I think the ones I love are mishandled the most, and some of the characters who I don't really care for the most are treated a bit better this season. There is some other stuff I like about this season, like, for the first time, we see that someone fishes and then cooks the fish. I always say that I want to see the survival aspect of this show more on display. And I think this is the first time where we see someone catch a fish and cook it. So that was nice for me to see. Rose and Bernard are kind of in this season, but only for one scene. But, you know, what they say to each other, I thought it was really sweet. And as dumb and goofy as this season is, and once you buy into the nonsense, it does become slightly entertaining. Not in a good way, but in that so bad it's good way. And if you know me, I don't critique shows for being so bad it's good, as long as I get some sort of entertainment from it. Still a lot of issues. Like, my goodness, every time it cuts to a different group, it either says 3 years later or 30 years later, and those texts appear multiple times every single episode. I'm just like, I get it. I know it's 30 years later. You can just show the group. We're not idiots. You can leave it to the audience to figure out. I don't know why this show is obsessed with bringing Jack's dad back every chance they got, but he's in a couple scenes this season that really didn't work for me. The actual plane crash is very unsatisfying. The very first scene we see the doctor dude in the mines, and we see Daniel down there, and it's meant to be like a, how did we get to this place? And the answer was very clear after the second episode, and when we eventually circle back to that scene, it's not at all satisfying. Kate getting on the submarine just to get off because she wants to go after Jack, even though she was just with Jack. She was right there, and she didn't do anything. That was frustrating. And then just the fact that Kate, Sawyer, and Juliet decide to get off the submarine, I thought was really stupid. In the second last episode, we see Frank discover what's in the box. We don't see it, and the way they talk about what's in the box afterwards is so silly. Like, wow, what's in the box really terrified me. Like, what's in the box? Like, that was really cool. And they just, people don't talk like that. You know, it's just like they're keeping it secret for the sake of it. Charles Whitmore, he ended up being a nothing character. Like, I felt like they were building him up to be a villain, but he really does nothing this season. And this island is just comically large at this point. Like, no one saw this giant foot on the beach before. Like, there's only so many new spots you can discover on the island, especially this much into it. So, I didn't buy it. But, yeah. The best episode this season is probably Whatever Happened, because that's when you get some of the time travel conversations. And even though everything with Ben is really stupid, it's entertainingly stupid. But man, I just feel like this season had a lot more potential. Like, if they set up this season and past seasons with the time traveling and there were hints of it, we could have gotten great payoff here. If there are tough discussions on what to do, especially involving Ben as a kid, that would be really interesting. If they turned Jack into the villain instead of treating him like he's a good guy, that would be interesting. If they treated Sawyer and Juliet like the victims they were, how his perfect life was ruined, and show how he resents the others for doing that to him, that would be interesting. It just say something meaningful about the cycle of life and time, but they just don't do that. This season had all the potential in the world, but they fell flat in almost every way. The time traveling element is inherently goofy, but it's also so bad it's good where you can have fun with it. Like, you can just laugh at the absurdity. Like, if you have a couple friends over, have a few drinks, watch this season, wow, that would be one long night. But you could get some enjoyment from it. But if you take itself seriously, it all falls apart. The characters aren't themselves. I feel like so many of the characters were really mishandled. It's a total mess. The script is just all over the place. There's not a clear focus, but you can laugh at it. So, is it a good season of television? No. Is it a fun one? Maybe. So, I'm going to go ahead and give Lost Season 5 a 5 out of 10. Okay, have you seen Lost Season 5? What did you think about it? Let me know in the comments down below. Make sure you like, make sure you comment, make sure you subscribe. Stay tuned for some more videos soon, and Gavin out.